0. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the May 24th Town Council meeting for the town of Basalt. We've just returned from a site visit to the Cypress Meadows Phase 5. We're a little bit slow getting underway, but we'll get the meeting underway and catch up, make up, like the airlines say, we're going to make it up in the air here. So if our town clerk would call the roll, I'd appreciate that. Get us started.
Be happy to, Mayor. Let's begin with Glenn Drummond.
Here.
David Knight.
Here.
Elise Huddle.
Present.
Ryan Slack.
Here.
Bill Kane.
Here.
Dieter Schindler.
Here.
And Angela Anderson.
Here.
Motion carries. 8 teams present.
Very good. So I want to make a few announcements before we get into the agenda. So for those that might be interested that are attending virtually and would like to address the council in the public comment section, access to the Basalt Town Council meetings can be found at www.basalt.net under Agendas and Minutes tab. Click on the May 24 meeting packet to open. On the meeting access instructions page, click on the link to join the webinar. So then you can put your hand up and we will acknowledge you and you can address council. So we also would request everyone to speak clearly and state their name and address. So thank you for that, for those that would like to address council. So, we have this little introduction on our agenda, and I think it'd be useful to read this. I'm not sure we have to do it every meeting, but every once in a while it's just good to remind ourselves what we're about here. So I'd remind everyone, Basalt is an inclusive, sustainable mountain community that boasts both historic charm and progressive vision. It's an engaging place to live, work, play, while offering an abundance of creative, professional, educational, and recreational outlets. That's pretty good. That's a pretty good summary. So, covered that. So with that, I will start our tonight's business. The first order of business is to review and approve the consent agenda, which consists of 2 items. One is minutes from May 10, 2022, and the Vail Board Council ratified tobacco tax grant awards. So, if any counselor would like to pull either of those off for further discussion, we can do that, or I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Mayor, I move the town council approve the consent agenda items as presented. Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, consent agenda stands approved. At this point, this is a call to the public. If there's anyone in the public that would like to address council, we would love to hear from you. Please restrict your minutes.
I was just, when you're finished with that, I have wanted to introduce somebody to you guys, so.
Oh, okay, great. Okay, let me just explain the ground rules for call to the public. Please limit comments to 3 minutes and address your comments strictly to the mayor. Identify yourself with name and address and when making comments. And so with that, is there anyone like to address council this evening? Rick Stevens would.
Hi, Mayor.
Rick.
Rick Stevens, 190 Riverside in Basalt. I just came here to say thank you on a couple of things. Number one being the Crown Mountain Aspen Shootout, where the town supported us with not only staff, with Ryan Westerling and Sal Landa, but with some financial assistance on traffic control and management. We had 90 teams. I don't know how many parents and grandparents and little brothers and sisters, but it was a herd. And we had a great debrief with Chief Knott, and we have a lot of opportunities for improvement that we're pursuing, and looking forward to fall ball and next year. And being the biggest event in the Mid-Valley, we are starting to recognize that we have a much bigger role in terms of what you just read. So, recreation.
That's great.
And I like this. That's where I'm headed next, is go down to see if any of these gross 6th graders I have developed any better skills in movement. But anyway, the second thing is I really want to thank you for granting the $5,000 to CSU, the Moving Mountain Summit, and Basalt Area Gives. That's going to be I think, an exciting event and appreciate it. And that speaks also to what you said earlier about sustainable communities and how we all work together to make this a better place. So that's it. I'll let you get back to work. Thank you very much.
Appreciate the comments, Rick. Thanks for coming in. Anyone else like to
Matt, you
address
wanna-
council?
You want to come up, Matt? Matt Koenigsknecht, and he will tell you how he pronounces it. Matt K, we call him, and he is our new recreation director. He happened to be here in the office. He has not started full-time with us yet, as he's finishing up the school year, but he was in there, so I wanted to grab him and just have him say hi to you guys real quick.
Great.
Yeah.
Welcome, Matt. Good to see you. Thanks for being around and available, and we're not losing much downtime on our recreation director.
Yeah,
here.
it's a big time of year right now.
Yeah.
I'm thrilled to be here, and I just want to thank you all for the opportunity and thank Ryan, and looking forward to working with you all in the future.
Excellent. Thanks for stopping by.
And we won't make you sit through the whole council meeting, so you can,
Yeah.
that's what you came to do.
So anybody calling in? I see David Warner. I think he's here for the item. I don't think he's probably interested in addressing council. So with that, I will open the floor, move to mayor and council reports and comments. I'll open with one. That was a lot of fun. So the manager and I spent a little time in some chilly rain with kids from fourth graders that were over at the Roaring Fork Conservancy, and we were did a tour of Old Pond Park, and kind of fishing is fun, so it was pretty neat. They had half the class inside in classroom looking at aquatic insects, and the other kids were out actually throwing a fly in a bubble out onto the pond, catching a lot of fish. It was really a neat day. So that was a fun deal. I had the honor of making a few remarks at the dedication of Basalt Vista last night, which is really kind of a school district event. So got to meet a lot of the folks that are moving in, and they seem really happy and pleased, and that things really buffed out now and really looking finished. So that was a great event. Anyone else want to comment?
Just to
Glenn.
give a short update on Basalt Emergency Management Committee meeting. We had that last Thursday. Biggest thing that everybody is trying to get the word out with wildfire season approaching. It's not a fun topic, but basically ready, set, go. Have an evacuation plan, kind of have your stuff ready to go if a wildfire were to break out. It's unfortunate, but we're seeing it happen all across the state already, so it's just a good step to take. They did do a booth here at Midland on Motors, so that's about it.
Anyone else? All right.
Yeah, I'll just make a quick
Go ahead.
comment on Ruapa. Thank you for the town support, continued inspection of the A&S mussels. And the season's Ruda is open for business, and there's a great crew up there again this year doing the inspections, and we'll hope that we keep the mussels out of Ruda.
Nice. Is is Rudai going to fill this year? Does it
No.
seem not going to fill?
No.
Oh. All right.
They're thinking maybe 90%, but
Well, that would be.
the amount of water that the tunnels are pulling is pretty dramatic right now.
Wow.
They're at 400% of their normal.
Whoa.
That was a week and a half ago, but
Wow.
so.
Okay. Louise.
I just wanted to say how much fun Motors on Midland was, and just a big thank you to everybody that was involved with that. All of the emergency service folks that were out there, and traffic control, and Basalt Education Foundation for organizing. It was really fun.
Yeah, it was a really successful night. Great. Basalt Education Foundation did a great job, and I think they're probably made out pretty well on the evening, so that was a good deal. Thanks for all the town staff that worked on that too. It was great.
And one other real quick, I just wanted to also thank Public Works. I had flagged Matt Wagner down at a hardware store about a discussion with the principal for a sign, and he had it out there within a day. So just awesome have that quick turnaround. So kudos.
All right. Turns us to the manager's report.
So I'm going to keep my mask on. I'm battling a bit of a cold, and I will spare you those germs tonight. So at any rate, a couple quick announcements for you. So I wanted to make sure we're trying to get the word out on the second survey that we have up on the letstalkbasalt.net website. And that is going to close on the 29th, I believe it is. And so there will be opportunity for more input, but certainly encourage everybody to visit that website and fill out the survey on the 3 different design options. Secondly, a reminder that Basalt Connect is going to start back up May 1st.
June 1st, yeah.
June 1st, thank you, sorry. June 1st, so it'll run June, July, August, September. So there'll be 4 straight months. And as a reminder, we had those summer months, and it may just be June, July, August. We'll be posting those hours where it's going to run all day long. So it'll be interesting to see how that data looks as we start collecting that for the summer months. But
Is that 7 days a week, Ryan?
yes, 7 days a week, and then before it was starting at like 6 in the morning and stopping at 9, I believe it was. Now it'll start at 6 and run all the way till 10 in the evening. So lots of options for people to get around town. And then the last is just a piece of information. So as you know, tonight on the consent agenda, you approved the grants for tobacco tax to some of our area nonprofits. So we sat down with the Vail Board and we had Angela sit in on that meeting, as well as David, and then our 2 citizen members, and then the chief. And so worked through that. Congratulations, you guys were able to approve some really nice grants for local nonprofits. And as you recall at the last meeting, I think we did the second reading for our supplemental appropriation for these expenditures. And we have a bit more money this year. And I've been speaking with the high school principal about some potential academic help. He has submitted an application to me, which I have reviewed, and I didn't have time to get it onto the council agenda, but just wanted to let you all know that that would be forthcoming at a future meeting. So they're looking for some assistance in the classroom, both for bilingual students and for general academic support in the core curriculum. So I think that's all I have for you.
Great, thanks.
Mhm.
Okay, then we'll turn to presentations, and Christie's going to update us on the first quarter financial statements. Beautiful pie charts.
Thank you, Mayor. Recommended by the Finance Advisory Board, so that was really awesome. Just to people learn different ways. They want to see it sometimes visually, sometimes with the numbers. I'm a numbers person, but pie graphs are awesome too, and they tell a story. So we'll start with that. Looking at the general fund year-to-date revenue by source on the next page. So the sales tax as a percentage of our total for the first quarter is 41%, which is a lot lower than we usually get, but that's simply because we have 26% in miscellaneous and other, because we had a COP purchase sale, so for that property for Loose Cannon. So when you take that into consideration, it's just, we're pretty much where we should be and a little bit ahead.
Our license permits and fees are 11%, which is ahead of budget. Usually those run 5% or so. So that's a positive as well on that. And on the expenditures, it's skewed as well because of the loose cannon purchase. That's why we're showing 65% of our expenses are public works. That's not normal. Usually we have a lot higher percentage in our police, but because of that land purchase, it's a little skewed. And then we have to catch up on some of our other capital projects we have going on for the year as well. So if you go to the next page, we get into the numbers. So when you look at the taxes, the really great thing to remember is if you look at your 2021 year-to-date actual, it's really great to compare with your actual to see kind of where we usually are compared to last year from a dollars to dollar standpoint. And then looking at the budget, looking at your percentage of budget, if you're looking at a quarter of the year completed, then we should be somewhere around a quarter if we were in a perfect world, but of course we're never in a perfect world. So we have some of our revenues that we receive earlier in the year, some later. The ones to note here are property tax received in the spring. About 45% of budget is about where we would anticipate we should be this time of year. Sales tax at 26%, which is above the quarter that you would anticipate. It's actually a little misleading because our sales tax is ahead more than that, but it's because we usually don't get a lot of our sales tax in the first quarter. So it's actually really good news that we're right on budget. That means we're a little ahead of budget actually. And then you look at the building permits and special improvement fees are the other two big ones to mention. We've already received our budget on the building permits for unrestricted building permits. So we've had a lot of those come in on the first quarter. And we're way ahead of budget right now for this time of year for special improvement fees, which is good. It is the spring. You usually get a lot of them in this time of year, but I would still say, suffice to say that we're running ahead of budget on those two. And that's really all that is noteworthy on the revenue side. Expenditures are looking lower than anticipated than that quarter because we have a lot of our capital projects that still have to be completed for the year, number one. And number two, we are down staff right now. We were down 4 staff members. That does affect, our salaries numbers and those kind of things. So, but now we're looking to be pretty close to fully staffed now. So we have one position we're still hoping to be able to fill pretty soon. And then we should be on budget there for the rest of the year, hopefully. Knock on wood.
What's our total town employment now?
37 full-time.
37.
Plus a lot of part-time for the pool and, some seasonal.
And how many sworn officers in police?
We have 12, including the chief of police, yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah. So we are growing, yeah, for sure. And then if you look over on the right box, in accordance with our investment policy, we put this in the quarterly report just to show you what our balances are. And this is noteworthy for one of our next agenda items on the resolution for looking at investments. So you can see that we have quite a bit of money in our call trust account, a lot, because we just passed our bond election. And how do we invest those? How do we ladder those? What is the best approach for making sure we maximize our investment earnings for those projects? So we're gonna look at that later this meeting, but we're still not getting a lot on those investments, unfortunately, with the low risk investments that are required for town government. So let's see, I'm just gonna keep going. If you guys have any questions, stop me. And I promise I'll stop talking.
Okay.
Restricted is a little bit more on the normalcy side on the pie graph at 63% taxes, which is our lodging tax and tobacco tax and sales tax. So we are running a little ahead on our REITs as well. We had just a really favorable quarter on real estate sales. So that was a real positive there. And then when you look at revenues and expenditures for the restricted fund, I've already gone through really the revenues that were noteworthy, but you can look at those where we're ahead of budget, et cetera, on those percentages. And we just haven't done a lot of our expending yet for this year, but we're still anticipating to spend the monies that we had budgeted. So it's just a matter of time and timing on that. And then the last page, last but not least, there's now 4 funds on this page. We continue to grow our funds for transparency purposes, for the public and for a council. Bond fund is just in and out for repayment of our bonded debt through the taxpayers, and that's through property tax earnings. So we get the property tax in, we repay our bonds there. So that one's right on budget. Capital Construction Fund, this is another kind of view. We do a quarterly report, which we did at the last council meeting on that. But this is just to show you all the revenues in and expenditures out in the budget there, and that there's no surprises there. Water Fund, we're pretty much on our water service on budget when you consider that our first quarter is a low water month. But we're running pretty close, a little ahead of what we were last year, which is good. And same thing with our expenditures, is we have some capital projects coming up in the summer and fall. That'll bring us closer to budget. So, so that's the full report.
So pretty rosy, wouldn't you say? I mean, in
Yeah.
terms of both property tax and sales tax.
Yeah, I think our property tax will probably be right on budget, which is good.
Yeah.
So that means everybody's paying their taxes and things are working
Yeah.
in the economy. And yeah, I think on the sales tax side is positive, and building permit fees.
So on the revenue side, there are no laggers. I mean, we're pretty close to 25% on
Yeah.
on
I
everything.
would say, and not in any of the major accounts. So even I should have mentioned too, our recreation fees are ahead as well, just because of the summer camps. So that just means more people are signing up. A lot of that is pass-through revenue.
Yeah.
But it's a good indicator, because that means people are using those services for their kids, which is a positive as well.
So in your budgeting, you anticipate, you build in consideration for seasonality. For example, you know, forecasting what our anticipated sales tax income was for the first 3 months. Because we're going to get a whale of a lot more sales tax in the next 3 months here, and then the 3 months after that. So those numbers are much higher for, you know, our next quarter.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, that's a very good point. And that's why we put the inflation numbers in our sales tax reports now, because we want to make sure that when we're looking at the sales tax, it's not just a favorable number. We have to also look at that inflation piece and how we're going to pay our costs, and all these capital construction. And so we kind of budgeted conservatively with that in mind, thinking that if we had inflation happen, which now it is, that then the council has the potential of being able to utilize some of that funding for projects as needed.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, good and bad. Inflation is kind
Yeah.
of a double-edged sword.
Okay, any questions for Christie on the first quarter financial report for the town? Thank you. I mean, it's really excellent and easy to follow, and good numbers, so thanks.
Thank you.
Good deal. So that takes us to council actions. First order of business is item 7A, public hearing and resolution number 37. Resolution of the Town Council of Basalt, Colorado, granting subdivision PUD preliminary plan approval to construct 155 dwelling units on parcel 5, Cypress Meadows subdivision PUD. Possum Co. LLC application. James Lint presiding.
Yeah, thank you. The applicants are making their way in, so if we could just give them a quick second here. And maybe after just that. So we have Michael Lipkin here this evening, representing the applicant group, and he can introduce his applicant team as part of the applicant comments. But this is a public hearing and introduction meeting to the Cypress Meadows Parcel 5 preliminary plan application to construct 155 dwelling units on parcel 5 of the Cypress Meadows subdivision and PUD. This evening, staff would suggest treating this as an introduction meeting to the project, as well as the discussion items that are part of the preliminary plan review from staff, and then hearing applicant comments, and then providing initial council discussion. And then ultimately, staff would recommend this evening continuing the review and the public hearing to June 14th, which is council's next meeting. So to begin, the property subject to the application is shown on this vicinity map, and it's also in your packet. It's parcel 5 of the Cypress Meadows subdivision and PUD. It's this parcel here, and it's located between the Willets Lake, which is located to the east of the project, and then Willets Lane is located to the west of the project. It's a 12.2 acre property, and it is zoned R4 PUD and located in the town's urban growth boundary. The applicants are proposing, as I said, 155 dwelling units on the property. And let me go to the next slide. Here is the proposed site plan. They're proposing the 155 dwelling units in 9 separate buildings. There are 7 buildings that are proposed to be the free market buildings, and then there are proposed to be 2 affordable housing buildings that would contain 46 deed-restricted units between the 2 buildings. The applicants are also proposing to finish the lake. Currently, it's very steep, and they're proposing to regrade and come up with a better grade in the lake, as well as to finish the path around the lake. Currently, the trail that goes around the lake stops about halfway, and they're proposing to finish that off as part of the application. In terms of access, they've proposed 3 access points. An access point via Lake Avenue that would connect up with East Valley Road, which is running over here. A second access point, which would be a connection to Evans Road. And then originally, the applicants had proposed just a emergency access point at Willets Lane, but the emergency services have provided comments and indicated that they would like to have 3 full vehicular access points. And so the applicant has changed that to a full access point onto Willets Lane. In changing the full access point onto Willets Lane, the engineers that were involved, the applicant's engineer and the town's engineer, recommended incorporating a 3-way stop at this intersection in the center of the project, and so that has been incorporated in the proposal. In terms of the review process, this is a 3-step PUD process, and so the applicants received a sketch plan approval previously, and we're currently in the preliminary plan application phase, which requires a P&Z recommendation to the town council. And ultimately, if the applicant received a preliminary plan approval, they would have to come back through one more round of review with the Planning and Zoning Commission and Town Council as part of a final plan application review. In terms of the discussion items that we have, they're included in your council memo, and there's analysis in the Planning and Zoning Commission memos that are attached to the council packet. The first one is consistency with the master plan. As I indicated, the property is designated as medium-density residential on the master plan with an affordable housing overlay. And you can see it here on the future land use map in the master plan. In terms of the density history on parcel 5, in page 176 of your electronic packet, there's a bullet point list of the history of the density on the parcel. So in short, in the 1999 master plan, there were 85 units included on the property in the master plan. And then in 2002 and 2003, there was an application, development application that was proposed that included 176 dwelling units at that time. And the council at that time, in reviewing that development application, indicated that 155 units would be more appropriate and acceptable for the site. So the 155 that came out of that review was included in the 2007 and 2020 master plans. And the 155 is based on the R4 zone district. Minimum lot area per dwelling unit. So when you do that calculation, once you take out right-of-way area, you get to about 155 dwelling units. So 155 dwelling units has been included in the traffic studies and the transit planning since 2007. And it's also included in the CDOT access permits for Willits and Cypress Meadows. Other discussion items included the compliance with the R4 PUD zoning. The applicants are proposing to meet all of the R4 zone district dimensional requirements with the exception of the proposed height. They're proposing for the height to be allowed to be 3 feet above the R4 zone district height for mechanical. Which is similar to what was allowed of the Park Modern project adjacent to it. They're also proposing similar design guidelines to that of the Park Modern project. And this shows you the architect's renderings that are proposed. They're similar to Park Modern, as you can see. Other discussion items that came out of the P&Z's preliminary plan review included the affordable community housing proposal. The applicants have proposed 46 deed-restricted units, which is up from 44 deed-restricted units at the sketch plan level. In addition to those 44 deed-restricted units, and you can see the breakdown of the unit types proposed, the applicants are proposing a 0.75 real estate transfer assessment, 0.75%, for affordable housing, in addition to the 1% real estate transfer assessment that was required by the original Cypress Meadows PUD development requirements. So that they would have a total of a 1.75% real estate transfer assessment on the project. The applicants are proposing for the affordable housing 1 building to be Category 2 and meet the Category 2 requirements in the town code. The affordable housing 2 building that you see here on the site plan is proposed to house the missing middle class area that is above the town's category affordable housing requirements. So they've proposed that this housing in this AH2 building have maximum incomes of up to $250,000 to $300,000 and $250,000 to $300,000, 300% of area median income. They've proposed for the rents on that to be 30% of somebody's income to be affordable. BAC has held, the Basalt Affordable Community Housing Committee, BAC, has held 3 meetings on the missing middle topic, and they're still reviewing that. BAC has recommended approval of the physical layout of the units as well as the bedroom mix that's proposed. But they've continued their review on this missing middle concept on the Affordable Housing 2 building until their next meeting. And so the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended going ahead and continuing the review of the rest of the project and requiring a decision and a recommendation from BAC on the missing middle concept on the Affordable Housing 2 building before the review of a final plan application. That said, it's slated for review by Bach again later this week to see if they have a recommendation. So there might be more feedback for council at the next meeting on the missing middle concept from Bach. Other discussion items that are included in your packet include the access and parking. The applicants have proposed, as I indicated, 3 access points. The one out to East Valley Road on Lake Avenue, full access point on to Evans Road here up to the north. And then, as I indicated, the Willets Lane access point has been proposed and changed to a full access point. So the draft conditions would include the 3 full access points that are in your resolution. It should be noted that David Myler has provided a letter as he represents 14 homeowners in Park Modern and Willets. And they would like not to have the full vehicular access on the north section adjacent to Evans Road. After receiving that letter, staff checked back in with emergency services as to whether there might be the potential for a cul-de-sac and just an emergency access to Evans Road. The emergency services reiterated that they felt that they needed the 3 full access points, and they felt that they needed it for potential evacuation purposes in the future, and they referenced the Boulder fire as an important kind of example of where additional connectivity is needed. So as I indicated, the draft conditions include the 3 access points. There is an alternative condition if council was not accepting of the 3 access points that you could consider. It's the alternative condition number 23 in your resolution, but it's certainly a discussion item. In terms of other discussion items and trip generation, the applicants have provided a traffic analysis that is part of the packet, and staff had Charlier and Associates, who is a third-party transportation engineer, review it and review it on behalf of the town. The determinations that were made are that the intersections would still operate at an acceptable level of service at build-out. And Charlier recommended that the applicants continue to do seasonal traffic counts to see if the projections are consistent with the reality. The applicants have conducted 3 seasonal traffic counts to this point, and so they would still need to do the summer traffic count, and that's included in the conditions of approval that they continue to do that. So we have a basis to look at whether the projections are consistent with reality as part of the final plan. There's also conditions based on the recommendations from Charlier that they implement transportation demand management strategies. We call them TDM strategies, and they include bike share, providing bus passes to affordable housing tenants, as well as providing car share infrastructure. And so those are included as draft conditions. The post-review and completion of the lake is another discussion item. As I indicated, the applicants have proposed to complete the grading of the lake to make it less steep going down into the lake. And they've proposed to provide the rest of the path around the lake so you can encircle the lake. At the sketch plan level, the staff came up with the concept of potentially having a beach and a water entry point, which is shown on page 157 of your packet. The post committee suggested checking in with the homeowners associations in Willets on the idea. And so staff did that, and there were comments provided by the Lakeside condos that had concerns about the beach concept. The post committee reviewed that and provided a recommendation that we not do the beach access point into the lake because they felt that it would be too impactive on the adjacent residents. The P&Z also supported post's recommendation not to have the beach access. So that's included in the conditions that the beach access would not be completed. Post identified that they were supportive of the remainder of the trail connections that were proposed, including the trail connection to the Willets Lane Trail to the west of the project, as you can see here. In terms of traffic calming, this was a discussion item at the sketch plan level. Because they were opening up the full access point onto Willets Lane, as I indicated, the engineers have proposed to do a three-way stop at this intersection. So the P&Z and staff felt that that lessened the need to have traffic calming within the center of the development concept because people were going to have to stop here anyway, whichever way they were driving. But Charlier recommended that there be kind of monitoring for several years after the road is installed to see if there really is a need for traffic calming. So we've included a condition in the draft resolution that the town would monitor speeds once the road was completed. And then within 5 years, if we determined that there was a need to put in speed tables, that we could do that. And the applicant would provide security to do that. Other discussion topics that have come up as part of the preliminary plan review include green building. There are conditions requiring that the applicants meet the sustainable building regulations, as well as the wildfire mitigation ordinance, which is a town-wide requirement. The applicants have also proposed to put in a couple car chargers that are proposed in the site plan in this area right here for public use. And they've proposed to provide conduit for future car charging in all of the free market spaces in the buildings. Other discussion items included the phasing and vested rights. In terms of the proposed phasing, the applicants are proposing to phase the development similar to that of Park Modern. They're proposing 10 years to build out, which is similar to Park Modern. They're proposing that subplats would need to be filed for each of the individual buildings, and they have proposed that each of the subplats would be valid for 3 years from their filing, and that they would have to file all 10 of the subplats within that 10-year period after approval. The applicants have proposed an automatic extension for time during a recession. The town code, and you'll find this basis in your staff memos to P&Z, has a 3-year vested right period as a standard, but you can vary that through the PUD process. So the P&Z and the town council at the sketch plan level indicated that they were supportive of between the 3 years that's in the town code and the 10 years that is part of the proposal. So the P&Z ultimately recommended a draft condition that provides for 7 years of vested rights with the extension ability for the town council to extend that if needed. Staff has provided a condition that is consistent with that of the P&Z's recommendation for the 7 years, but there's also alternative conditions that could be considered by council that would allow for up to the 10 years that is proposed by the applicant. So as I noted, the P&Z made a recommendation of approval on the preliminary plan with the conditions that are in your draft resolution. So this evening, staff would recommend, as I indicated, treating this as an introduction meeting. The applicants will provide some comments. Then staff would suggest taking public comments because it's a notice public hearing, and then providing initial council discussion. Be helpful to staff and the applicant if council can identify additional information that you might need at a future meeting to work towards a decision on the application. But ultimately, today, staff would recommend continuing the public hearing and consideration of the reso to the June 14th meeting. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen here. And the applicants will provide comments. And they have to.
Michael, Jeff, do you guys want to, would you like to make remarks, presentation?
Yeah,
Okay.
Sure.
All the above.
Thank you, James. I wasn't sure if did you ask me to reintroduce the team? Yeah, okay, so I'm sitting here on my right is J. Ray Barlow, who has been working with us since 1995, and J. Ray is an architect, but also runs the construction for Park Modern for us at the same time. Jeff has been working with us since 2001, and Jeff does just about everything from architectural design work, construction management. He's jack of all trades. The missing partner is David Warner, who I've worked with since 1981. So there's a good bit of history between us all, and there's a good bit of history with Willits as well. And I'm going to just very briefly, because I know a couple of you are new to the process. Thank you. I'm sorry, I've never had allergies before today in my life, having an attack in my eyes and coughing a little bit, but I apologize for that. But I don't think it's contagious. Yeah.
Applicants often kind of have issues when they come to town hall.
No, I like it here. Just really briefly, these 3 ranch properties were assembled in 1988. We spent a lot of time trying to understand what to do with the property and how to do it. Ultimately, we developed a master plan with the town in 1995. And in 1997, I guess, we completed approvals on the residential portion of Willits and began construction. And we completed approvals for the town center in 2001. So we've been doing this for a while, and this is the last piece of Willits. And I'm stalling while Jeff gets a map up there. But I guess I'll say a couple things. I think when this was approved, it was controversial. There was nothing on that property. It was brownfield. But it was in a good location for growth and development. It was adjacent to 82, so well served by public transit. But what was going on at that point was the growth pressures were already being felt by all the communities up and down the valley. None of them felt like they could absorb the growth we were looking at very gracefully. And Willits seemed to provide an opportunity that was central to a lot of sprawl that was going on and could collect that growth, take some pressure off Basalt, and allow Basalt to basically maintain its character and not have to change too dramatically to find a tax base. Willits proved to be a very effective tax base for Basalt, as well as provide 21st century services like Whole Foods, like medical, a lot of the stuff that's happening there that would have been impossible to put in Old Town Basalt without dramatic changes. If I'm looking, Jeff, for I'll say 1 or 2 quick things that we also feel pretty good about that work with the planning here. The linear park that runs all through Willits, out down to the soccer field, ultimately a trail around the lake. We started with the premise, I grew up in a small town, that everybody ought to live within 2 blocks of a park and especially a kids' community space they could get to. That's worked really nicely. We took the frontage road that ran in front of City Market and is sort of typical of strip development, and we took it inside and made it Willits Lane and our central street running all through here, and that seemed to be a nice, a much better way to try to plan development adjacent to the highway. I think we all know what we're looking at over here, but this is parcel 5, which is what we're here to talk about today. And of course, it's adjacent to Park Modern. And you can see it's got a similar scale and density. We've talked about that a little bit earlier. I think James covered a lot of things pretty well. I'd like to get back to the affordable housing to introduce you to that topic. I know it'll be a topic at our next conversation. But can we go to the site map for parcel 5? So here, I think this is what you were seeing today, what happens at Willits. This is some of the linear park running through Willits. Again, this was brownfield, dead flat, but it was the irrigation out of the lake and working with the Metro District that allowed us to create the irrigation that made this possible. Let's keep going, Jeff. And there's just one of the Park Modern buildings, and what we're now proposing is going to have an awful lot of similarities to this. I'll show you the architecture in a minute. We have made changes, modernized it, made it all a little bit smarter. We'll see that in a minute. But these are all images of Park Modern, but a little redundant with how we spent the day today. Here are the two affordable housing buildings. And I want to talk about those a little bit, because when we were here last, we assumed both those buildings would be very much like the affordable housing that's being built. We started doing our homework and learned that Basalt has roughly 220 affordable housing units, and more than half are occupied by people working up in Aspen. Now, historically, the Mid-Valley and Aspen have had a nice symbiotic relationship where Aspen generated the opportunities and work opportunities for people living in the Mid-Valley, and those people got to live in a really nice community that was growing and changing very nicely. But we've gotten to a point where maybe that doesn't work as well as it has been, and besides having more than half our units in Basalt supporting Aspen businesses, and it really means supporting them. They have to pay their employees less when they're living in affordable housing down here, but is it time, should Basalt taxpayers be continuing to do that, or should we be looking at what Basalt's needs are? So that got us thinking, well, maybe the second building should really be more of middle-class resident occupied workforce, middle-income resident occupied workforce housing. And so in our homework, here are a couple of things we learned, besides that more than half is already being used by Aspen and could be available to Basalt as those leases turn over. But looking in the MLS about 3 weeks ago, there were 2 properties on the market for sale in Basalt and Carbondale under $1 million, and they were both just under $1 million. There were 4 things for rent up to $10,000, between $5,500 and $10,000. The other thing we learned is our free market housing in the Mid-Valley is now being bought by Aspen businesses for their employees. So I've lived in Aspen for almost 40 years, and I have watched the middle-income families that I knew entirely disappear from Aspen. The Aspen Music Festival has 19 employees, and it's been 10 years since one of them was living in Aspen. But Basalt is looking at its middle-income opportunities just disappearing. It just has become an unaffordable community over the past 2 years, and we thought maybe there's an opportunity to look at this second building as a resident-occupied middle income to house all those people that are kind of like all of you and the people that have historically been living here that make more than, 2 teachers can't move into the affordable housing in Basalt, a couple. A doctor can, a lawyer can, somebody who's well paid in their business. A well-paid electrician is above our affordable housing guidelines now. And it seems like what Basalt needs, and I think it's absolutely Basalt's biggest issue right now, is what it's going to do to preserve its character and its middle-income community. And, I'm wondering where doctors, but, in the new Stedman building, where they're going to live. Can we have them living in our community? The top floor of that building is all researchers. I'd like to think it'd be great to have some of these people that are moving to town be able to move into the community the same way, all of you guys did. And that may be more important than continuing to produce workforce housing that supports Aspen. Maybe Basalt has to look at what it needs to do to preserve its sense of community. So that's where our conversation and desire to work with you guys to come up with what the standards ought to be to provide that middle-income housing. And I would go as far to say that I think we should be building that building first, because that's the most pressing need we have. And I know this is a change in policy, and that was part of what I think was difficult for both Bach and P&Z to entirely wrap their heads around, because they're used to reviewing projects, not changing policy. So I think it's time Basalt just has to acknowledge that it's going in a direction that I don't think this community maybe wants. As somebody who's raised kids in Aspen, I've watched that community change where there is no middle income even before the most recent, I mean, that's been a problem for 10 or 15 years in Aspen. People like, and me don't move to Aspen anymore. People like you won't be able to move to Basalt anymore, and that seems problematic. And I realize I'm getting ahead of myself, and this is an introduction to, I think, a conversation James thinks we'll get into at the next meeting, but I just wanted you all to know what we're thinking about. I think we have some good ideas about how to answer that. It's easy to talk about income at 30% because that's well below the national average, and it's kind of baked into our standards for affordable housing. We just need to raise those caps so we capture more of the people that we're increasingly leaving behind, or at this point almost entirely have left behind. And it's a philosophical question, and you guys, we can ask to do this, but the decision is really yours on what we will do with affordable housing, and we'll take the lead from you guys, but we'd like to make the strongest case possible to figure out any way we can to preserve the Basalt. I've come to say that I live in a town that used to be Aspen. I'd hate to have Basaltines thinking the same way. So that's my 2 cents on affordable housing, and I'm not sure there's anything else I ought to add to what James has said, but we are really happy to answer any questions we can.
Yeah. Jeff, you good there? Were you going to present the site plan or anything, or does that?
I mean,
I guess there are a few other things.
we can keep going, but I think
There's the architecture has changed a little, so we'll talk about that for a minute. We're dealing with basically the same kind of, footprints basically. What's not completely obvious here is we've changed the window systems. We have added fins on the sides on the building to basically help with a little bit of sun control on the western facing units. So, they're similar but different, but will certainly function very much the same way. And with respect to the affordable housing, since the last time we've seen it, we've moved both buildings to the north, one more than the other. We've created more of a landscape zone along the south edge to protect it from the adjacent mini storage. And at the same time, we are working with the owners of the mini storage to replace their lighting. That's been the objection from neighbors in all directions there to a modern shrouded down light. We're talking to them about timers, but we haven't gotten a firm answer from them if they think they provide the nighttime safety they feel they need on the property. And I will say about the affordable housing, the minimum required for us on this project is 21 units. We're doing 46, and on average, they are 25% larger than the units prescribed by your affordable housing, but that's what we felt we needed to do to provide the kind of housing people deserve, and school teachers and, the people we want in our community. We should treat them as well as we'd like them to treat us. And we feel great about the plans, and we've worked hard on them, and we would have liked to have made them smaller and less expensive for us, but we didn't get there. This is a little bit of the affordable housing. We've created public spaces at the either end of the two buildings as well as between them. We've put in a playground. With respect to traffic calming, we have done the things Charlier has asked for with respect to charging stations, shared parking areas. We are putting in along one side of the parking, continuous conduit for future electric beyond the, what, 3 stations we're putting in, Jeff?
2.
2. But we're prepared to add those as they become needed.
What's
The
the-
one thing Charlier has suggested was a contribution to bus passes. We sort of understand that, but because we'd like to see this housing, excuse me, be Basalt-centric, we're much more interested in supporting the internal circulation in Basalt between Old Town and Willets and perhaps the high school. Seems more important to us. If employees that work in Aspen need a bus pass, it's high time we ask their employers to supply those. And it does raise the question of whether the same rental structure should exist for Aspen employers. It could be that, there should be a surcharge for that goes back into our affordable housing program. If we are subsidizing Aspen businesses, maybe there's a give back we should ask for. Again, say a little bit of the history. In '78, when Aspen established its affordable housing program, most of the businesses were locally owned and the money stayed in the community, and it wasn't as prohibitive as it is today to build affordable housing. But right now, it either subsidizes business owners, very few at this point in Aspen are local, so that's money going out of the valley, or Aspen landlords who are in a position to charge a little more rent. So I'd like Basalt to just maybe address.
Would you summarize the mix of units and kind of floor area for the free market portion of this?
On the free market, I'm sorry?
Yeah, on your units, these.
At Park Modern.
Yeah, what's the mix of 2 and 3 bedroom? What is the
Yeah,
floor area? makeup
we
of-
are primarily 3-bedroom. And we do have 2-bedroom units, and we have some 1-bedroom units. The demand has been absolutely for 3-bedroom units. And what I think has happened is our bigger Park Modern units have become a replacement for single-family houses. And I think we should all be happy about that because it's a denser product than the sprawl of single-family houses, and I think that's a good thing. So we will now have units about 20% bigger than we had in Park Modern, and we were just learning there's a demand out there. And so they
It's all
start to get into.
subsurface parking, the common parking garage like Park Modern?
Yeah, all of it is, all the parking is below grade, even though we're, other than the affordable housing. And that's worked very nicely for us at Park Modern because when you look out the window, you're looking into a pastoral landscape and not a parking lot. So it's an expense we've incurred, but it certainly seems to be the right idea.
Okay, if there are, no questions of the applicant at this point, looks like we have a fair number of people who'd like to speak tonight. This is a public hearing. So, at this point, I would suggest that we open the public hearing, hear from the public. You can comment in person if you're here, and you can comment virtually if you're watching this online tonight. So, I will open the public hearing at 7:10. And be pleased to hear from the public. We request that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. We have a lot of people that would like to speak, and I just have to remind everyone, this is not a dialogue. Often people want to get up and engage individual counselors in conversation. We're just here to receive your comments, and to manage expectations. We're not going to be voting tonight. As James stated at the outset, this is an informational meeting. So we're taking a lot of comment and we're getting the report from staff, and we look forward to hearing from the public. And then in future meetings, we're going to be delving into each one of these issues. We got housing mix, road network, the vesting schedule, unit counts, lake grading, building height. There's a lot on that list. So we will have our chance to go into the weeds a little bit on those items. But with that, I would open the floor for anybody who'd like to address council. You can come on up to the podium here. We have a little microphone. We have some bright lights. Please tell us your name and address.
Good evening. Thanks for allowing us to speak. We appreciate it. It is a public meeting, and we always appreciate, the opportunity to get up and address everybody. My name is David Furnitz. I live at 102 Evans Road. I'm in one of the Park Modern buildings. And I have a question for the applicant. Can I ask that at this meeting? The only question I have is when I look at the renderings of the Lake Modern buildings, and then I look at the affordable housing buildings, it appears to me that the affordable housing buildings are 3 stories and not 2 stories. Did I misinterpret those renderings, or am I correct in that?
That's correct.
Okay, and is there a difference in height between,
They are both within the limit of the zoning district.
so the difference in height is? I know they're within the limits of the zoning, so my question is what's the difference in height between the Lake Modern buildings and the?
There is no difference.
They're the same,
Same height.
so the ceilings are
Yeah,
reduced.
yeah.
Thank you very much, I appreciate it.
Yep.
You have a good evening.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? David?
Good evening, everybody. I'm David Myler. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you a bit tonight. I'm here on behalf of several owners of units within Park Modern and the Willits Townhomes. And as James mentioned, I did submit a letter prior to the Planning Commission hearings addressing a number of concerns regarding the impacts of Possum Lane and the connection to Evans. And while my clients would prefer that the Possum Lane not be a thoroughfare through the project and that the access be restricted, we also have to recognize and take serious consideration of the comments that have come from the fire district and the police department regarding emergency access, not only into the project but out of it as an escape route. And I've spent some time talking to the folks at the fire district to understand what their concerns are. And I also want to, and I'm basically here tonight to propose a resolution to the objections that were stated. And I need to acknowledge that Michael met with members of the Park Modern Board yesterday, and they had a very positive discussion about the Possum Lane impacts. And I want to pass on that the opportunity for that discussion and the ideas that came out of that were very much appreciated by the board members, and I think they would be shared by the other members of or owners of Park Modern. So that in addition to the commitment to open the Lake Avenue and Willits Lane intersection, which has been discussed tonight, Michael agreed to prohibit parking on Possum Lane and to install additional landscaping along Possum Lane on the Park Modern property in order to mitigate those impacts. And again, we're greatly appreciative of those offers, and I'm here tonight simply to request that those commitments be included as conditions of approval and properly documented as we move forward, either perhaps in the declaration that would be coming, plat notes, that sort of thing, to make sure that the parking restrictions and the landscaping are followed through on. If I can, and I know I've got 3 minutes, I'd like to take my hat off as a representative of some of the Park Modern owners and make a couple of comments as a longtime advocate for affordable housing in the Roaring Fork Valley, including the attempt to create a coalition that Elise will be on the board of and that we've been working on for quite some time. I have to say that I greatly appreciate what the applicant is proposing in the way of affordable housing, especially doubling the amount of housing that's being provided. I don't need to explain to you what we have in the way of a crisis in this valley and this region when it comes to inventory, and so I'm greatly pleased. And I appreciate a lot of Michael's comments about the history and an attempt to try to provide some sort of opportunity for people who work in Basalt to live in Basalt. There's no question that that is an important part of the affordable housing strategy. The one thing that I would like to have some reconsideration on is the number of, not the number of, but the inclusion of ownership units in the project, particularly for the RO type product and the employees in this area who have higher incomes. You know, most of the housing programs that we have are targeted toward the lower income groups. It would be fantastic to have ownership units in this project for the middle and upper middle income groups. Ownership builds community. We heard that over and over last night at the dedication of the Basalt Vista project, which is all ownership. So I would just ask that in the process of working through this project, that we ask the applicant to consider some portion of the project as ownership units instead of all rental.
Thanks, David. Michael, you were in accord with those, you came to some agreement on Possum Lane relative to parking and
Sure.
landscape, and
Sure.
great. Thank you. Gail, you're next up, looks like.
Thank you very much. And again, good evening. It's nice to see you all, and thank you for those that were able to come to the dedication last night. And I'd like to just follow up on the comments that David made relative to ownership housing. When we're looking at adding 155 homes to this community, of which 46 will be considered affordable housing, we know that the, I'm sorry, my name is Gail Schwartz, for the record. Sorry, Pam. And I also.
We were guessing that.
And just by full disclosure, I am on the HOA of Park Modern and a resident as well. But what I struggle with is the fact so many of the most recent projects that have been approved are rental. And we heard from the school district last night, we heard from Pickton County, that ownership is how we keep people in our community. And I have provided, yet again, the same PowerPoint that describes the benefits to a community and how we stabilize families with ownership housing. The missing middle, I'm struggling with 200,000, 300,000 income households. Our AMI, which is the area medium income, is approximately 75,000. That's our middle. Where are we getting this middle that something's missing? We felt we were housing the missing middle at Basalt Vista with 70 to 100% AMI. Go to 120% AMI. But my recommendation would be, as David said, there is an opportunity for an RO product, that would be resident-owned product, and that would be year-round occupied by a resident and someone working in the community. I'm really struggling with the fact that to bring on yet again more rental units, which, and again, if it's meeting our guidelines, then we can have our teachers and people that work in our shops and our young professionals living in the units, but they're not going to be here long-term as their rental, and there is no ability to transition into the free market. I would like to just speak to a couple comments that I heard. I sat through the BOC meetings, I sat through the P&Z meetings, that Basalt Vista is a standard for this community. It has a HOA, it has a reserve study that is being funded every month by those homeowners. It is a net zero community where community members are, those residents are paying $14 a month. I would ask that this become our standard here. It has been represented in a couple times by the applicant that the construction defect laws would apply to the ownership units of the employee homes, the ownership for the workforce housing. That construction defect law also applies to every free market unit in that project. So there was this sense I got from the P&Z, and I spoke to James about it, that the construction defect law is a 7-year obligation for every free market condominium unit that's being built in the project overall. So that being said, that this is an opportunity for this community to take this small amount of affordable housing and asked that some portion of that be dedicated for ownership. So when we requested in our visit with you several months ago that 30% of your new affordable housing units be ownership, and this is an opportunity for you to look at this proposal and bring on some ownership housing to stabilize your community and stabilize our workforce. So, thank you very much.
Thanks, Gail.
Christina King, Lakeside Condos, Building 700. One question I have not to be answered today is a little bit more clarity around the buildings or the development between 700 and those buildings, like to understand what's happening there and potential questions or requests. We have a fence that is up against our parking. Does that stay? Like, it would be really helpful to understand a little bit more about what's happening in that area, just so I can see how that is going to be affected over time and potentially asks any requests.
If you can answer this easily, you can. If not, you guys could take this offline. You could meet
That's
on
fine,
your
too.
own and
I can
answer
meet
that.
with you, yeah. And then I think the biggest point that I'd like to make and reiterate from Gail and the other gentleman is the affordable housing. I'm just going to tell my story. I moved here in 05, 06 for a short time, and in between my bachelor's and my master's, and I said, I want to come back here, but I need to figure out who I need to be before I can afford to live here and make myself, become who I am today. So went out, got my master's, came back, traveled a little bit, and I do own a house in Philadelphia. I'm proud of that. But when I came back, I was like, I need to buy. The amount of stress that is put on a person in this community by renting space for their own business, I have my own business, is extremely high. And in 2020, March, I was able to buy my unit at 700, which was amazing. And right now, today, I don't know if I could afford to do that because our units have increased $300,000. So when you talk about your story and the evolution of what's here, it means so much to me that you want to give back to the affordable housing and to the community. When you say 250,000, 300,000, I'm curious what that means. And especially as Gail said, the mean rate of salary is 75,000. And I know you're speaking about doctors and Stedman Clinic wanting to live in your units, and I think that's excellent. But for the police officers, for the mental health professionals, to which I am, when I first came here, I worked at the Aspen Hope Center. My salary was 50 grand. I have my own business. I make more than that now, but I'm still not able to afford what you want for your affordable housing. So my request to you and to the council is to reconsider what this number really represents or what this means and how it will actually fulfill the need that you would like to in our community, because I do really believe in what you're talking about, that there is a need. I don't want Basalt to become Aspen, and so I stand behind you on that, but I do think in this matter, we really do need to figure out what that number is to support the professionals in our community to keep it alive. So, thank you.
Thank you for his comments. Anyone else? Anybody calling in? Okay, I think that concludes the public comment. Are there questions of council from the applicant or for James? Again, we're going to revisit this. I don't know if we're going to do it on the 28th or when we're going to be back at this. But this is an opportunity to maybe flag issues, ask questions, get comfortable with your understanding of what actually is being proposed. So, Elise.
I appreciate David Myler working with the applicant on a resolution to the road issue. My question, if there's no parking along, is it Possum Lane? Just curious what the guest parking situation would be. That was the thing that jumped into my mind.
I think when you see the map, it'll become a little clearer. The section we're talking about is just this section between these two buildings that are existing Park Modern buildings. That stops here. and the parking needs for Park Modern have already been addressed in guest parking. So we're just not doing any parking along there, even though the road once anticipated that. We've eliminated that parking. And so, do we have something that shows this a little bit better? Yeah. Maybe not. Well, there's a building right here that we can't quite see as well as this. And I just want to point out the distance from the side of these buildings to the, where they front on Evans Lane is pretty much the same distance, or a little more on average. So, but we have a lot more landscape opportunity because we don't have stairways and ramps and all the other things. So I think we can significantly mitigate the impact for those people, but on their property, and we have all of our parking needs solved on this parcel.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you for the clarification.
Anyone else?
I have a comment slash question, just, you know, I've heard a lot of concern and reading the letters and everything is, with the opening of Willets Lane entrance, would it be possible to put like an underpass there for the Willets Lane bike path to, you know, well, I know, it's a big ask, I just planting a seed.
Yeah.
There's a lot of traffic on there, you have a lot more cars, you have, you know, 155 units, you know, the 46, most of the people that are living in the affordable housing are probably gonna enter and exit there. There's a lot of pedestrian traffic on that. It's just a comment suggestion.
Yeah.
It's
I'll think about
spitballing.
it.
Yeah.
Out of left field, so I don't even know how to comment, but.
I have a question. Did I hear correctly that the inhabitants of the affordable housing units won't have access to the underground parking?
Well, the underground parking is under each building.
So they'll have underground parking?
No, they have on-street parking, the affordable housing.
Okay, and is that pretty common in developments like these where you have free market and affordable housing, that people in affordable housing would have different amenities than?
Sure, yeah, I think it's pretty common, yeah. This is certainly a luxury project. But I will say that the exterior of the affordable housing are the same materials, the same look. We've made them 25% bigger. I know very few even luxury buildings that in areas like ours that don't rely on grade parking. So it's just an expense we can't absorb.
Anybody else, comments, questions?
I mean, the comments I have, and I brought them up at preliminary, or the sketch plan, is how when we did the site walk today, you said each unit, each building is 110 feet apart, approximately.
Yeah.
And is there any way that you can make that happen with the affordable housing so that they feel like they're more part of the community?
You know, I think I misrepresented that. The truth is, when they're, can we go back to the color site plan? So I guess what I really meant is,
Maybe I'll find you the colored one real quick.
I guess the one that also has Park Modern would be good.
That work?
So I guess we do have adjacencies that are much less, but the broad faces between the buildings, you know, are 110 feet-ish between them. And the truth is, for these units, it's much further from that. This building probably has the longest views in all of Willets in this building. So these buildings are facing this way, and the space between them, you know, this could all be one building. You know, we've sort of separated it, you know, to break up the massing and also to be able to phase it. But
So do you orient them the way I'm just curious.
the units are oriented this way.
So that's your whole goal, is so that they have the better view of the interior park space?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, you know, I feel very good about the planning of the affordable housing. Looking to the south, you know, we're making an effort with landscape. We'll consider a 6-foot fence if we need it, which is the code limit. But as those trees grow in, I'm going to feel great about that. I mean, you know, if you go to Willets Town Center, where values have gone up pretty high, I can't remember, I think those buildings across the street from each other are 90 feet apart. So, you know, it's, I feel very good about what we're proposing in the way of affordable housing. And,
So, David?
Just wanted to comment that the traffic study, I'm glad to see the data from that, from the past one. I have one question at the end for all this, but the Bach findings, when they come back, will be interesting to hear, and I hope we can continue the discussion around kind of, whatever you call it, the gap, right? I think we all recognize it is somewhere that we need to get our arms around. So let's see what they come back with, and I want to have kind of a more robust conversation at that point. Appreciate the design. It's a big upgrade on the affordable housing from last time. Last time it was pretty bare bones looking. Now it blends better, everything, so that's good. Let's see what else. And I want to commend you guys as well for kind of figuring out some kind of solution there for that entranceway at the Possum Evans intersection. It's great to hear that. I do want to just kind of ask us the question, you know, you don't have a crystal ball. You don't know what's going to happen with the economy and a lot of other things going forward here. And I know P&Z has recommended 7 years for the vesting and everything. The town code's 3 years. There is a process for requesting an extension and all that. So I just kind of want to hear a little more, maybe color around, you know, why we would need to kind of go even beyond the standard when there's a request process for exceptions, knowing, you know, caveat that I know you don't have a crystal ball, and there's uncertainty that you guys are trying to mitigate against, and that's part of the answer, but I'll let you add to that. But overall, thanks for coming back with what you did.
yeah, the phasing, let me give you a little bit of history. Park Modern was 7 buildings and took us 10 years of one of the longest economic expansions we've ever had in this country. We are now looking at 9 buildings and a tremendous amount of site work. The Park Modern property was shovel-ready when we started, and we've got a good year and a half of very expensive site work to do. You saw what it's going to take over there. So we think we need 10 years. What's interesting is we were limited in how quickly we could build Park Modern. The council then was concerned we would build it too quickly. But now we're looking at, so our last Park Modern building was our smallest, and significantly smaller than the others. And we went into it with a lot of experience that we gained. J. Ray does a remarkable job of scheduling and budgeting. We have never, the budget during construction has never gone up more than several %. He's been pretty much on the money with the timing schedule. We thought we could build this building in 10 months, and it took us more than 14 in the current environment, and we had 30% increases in price from the prior building. So yeah, we really don't have a crystal ball. We are fighting with Aspen for workforce now. Aspen is willing to pay whatever it needs to. That economy can afford that. Those people are paying their laborers, which is generally considered the lowest paying job in Aspen now. That job that does not require high school education, language skills, that's $31.50 in Aspen. You know, Basalt is having trouble, and we see it in construction, competing with what Aspen will pay. So I don't know how a lot of things are going to work in the Mid-Valley economically. I don't know a business in Aspen or the Mid-Valley that isn't looking for workforce. I have no idea how long it's going to take to build this project. But the 3-year standard is the same for a garage addition or a bathroom renovation as it is for a 12-acre project and 155 units. So, you know, it isn't a meaningful place to start, but we're suggesting we're going to do a more complicated, larger project with more buildings and a lot more site work. Even in 10 years, that feels like could well be a stretch for me. And that's part of the reason why, if we have another pandemic, where there's a force majeure opportunity for us to just kind of demand extra time, but if there's a recession and we can't move forward. But God knows, I'd hate to be trying to open a business in the Mid-Valley today and think there's any labor to do anything. So I expect even with 10 years, we may well be coming back to you guys. But on the other hand, I don't know why it matters to you guys and why you wouldn't want us to do it in the smartest way possible. And if that takes longer to do it well, that's what it takes. But hate to think that one of the things we need to worry about is a timetable. I'd like us to be worrying about doing the best project we can do. But I know there have to be some brackets around that, but that's the best I can do for an answer.
Thank you.
Can I make a final comment?
No, go ahead.
So I wanted to address the issue of resident-owned properties. And I think I've said all along, that I think it's really important that we have some deed-restricted ownership properties in Basalt, that I didn't like the optics of what it looked like to say you can rent here, but when you want to buy, you can't afford it and you have to go elsewhere. So I'm definitely in support of that. So I would like to ask Bach to consider that when they're looking at that missing middle. And then I also wanted to add, most everybody on council knows that I live in Roaring Fork Apartments, which is an affordable housing project. And I can tell you anecdotally that there are folks being forced out because of their income limits. And we're not talking about doctors at the Stedman Clinic. We're talking about 2 nurses. Yeah. Or somebody that works at the Roaring Fork Club and somebody that works for Skico. So we definitely need to find a way to address that. We can't have these people leaving the valley because they don't have a place to live, because we need their services. So I appreciate both what you're doing, looking at the missing middle, and then this concept of looking at resident-owned properties that are deed restricted. So thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, I'd like to make a comment on a couple items here, and I think I offer these in the spirit of giving you some things to think about before we see this again and before we come back and wrestle with it. First of all, I'm enormously relieved to hear that we've come to some accord on Possum Road.
Yep.
Turns out maybe, that was visionary, the name for Possum Road.
I think it's
so
something we probably need to modify the name.
Yeah. So that's an amicable resolution. That's a good one. Personally, I think the 7 years feels fine for a vesting schedule. We just went through revesting for Stotts Mill, and I don't think the pain and suffering of having to have hearings all the time every 3 years is probably good for the developer or for the community. So, 7 years is going to be I'm probably good with that. I would like to challenge you on some thoughts about the ownership housing question. And my perspective on this comes from a little different view, and that is that when you recount, I like to remind people, say, what's Basalt doing for affordable housing? Well, Basalt has achieved, and I'll use the word achieved because we haven't built them all, but we've enabled the construction of 179 units in 36 months in Basalt, which is affordable housing. And I think we're proud of that. And I think, but when you go through the accounting, Roaring Fork Club 41, Stotts Mill 64, Roaring Fork Apartments 56, the Clark's application pending, but undoubtedly something's going to resolve there, 67, Skico Housing 38, and that's not the full tally, but that's 266 units, all rental. And I personally am sympathetic to the argument that a little piece of the rock and the opportunity to own is crucial. I also think, the appreciation caps and the right of first refusal and the limitations that we've experienced for 40-some years in the Valley, have probably done their job. And I think it's time to think more creatively about how to create an ownership opportunity. I think this discussion earlier about an RO, possible resident occupancy kind of arrangement where the only deed restriction is that the owner upon sale has to sell it to a qualified resident of the valley, resident/worker bee. You know, Michael, you've been an excellent, and actually I would go so far as say enlightened developer for Willits and for the Mid-Valley. And, you know, there's some remarkable things that have come. I mean, I think we're all proud of Takal, we're all proud of the Stedman Center, and you've done some great stuff. I know you can come up with something very clever, and you'll do a great job, but I just want to raise the flag, because I do have some reservation about just constantly going to the well in the pure sort of only solution being rental housing. I think there's got to be a way. So, and I think you ought to think creatively about the site plan too. You know, we don't, you know, need to replicate two rectilinear buildings side by side. I'd get very creative about that little corner of your property, and, you know, look at some models, and think about maybe a attached single family option. And but I do think that, you know, you have a pro forma. We have to watch the pro forma for the community, and we've done a whale of a good job on rental housing, and we're just not getting any diversity or mix. And I think that there's a role for an ownership opportunity. And, you know, I think you're pretty generous in terms of the number of units you put into this thing. So I don't want to scare you off, but I think that this is a critical deal. So they're my thoughts. One last thing. I would also ask you to take a look at Stotts Mill rental housing and the carports that they've done there. So inexpensive, but just in terms of livability, these are open air, but they keep snow off cars, and they screen cars, and the visual appeal of these, a vast improvement over just surface parking. And, you know, look at it. It's not going to be a condition of approval, at least in my view, but, you know, there might be a way for you to architecturally soften the product, and you might like it. So I encourage you to look at those. So anyway, my thoughts.
I would, you know, second that. Really look at that the ownership part. I think that's gonna be a large hurdle for you. I think you have the ability to do it. You know, you're presenting us a great project as far as I'm concerned, but that's probably gonna be a big deal.
Can I just share with you my perspective? And listen, I want to get this right, and I want all of you to think we're collectively getting it right. So one of, I think you know, the threshold issues is, you know, the liability issue. And, you know, Gail said it's the same for for the free market, but the history of lawsuits is that they show up in lower income properties. And, you know, I don't know why, but, you know, both my attorney and your ex-attorney, you know, have said, you know, this is a real liability you take on when you take on selling these units. And we know that one of the problems is in these projects, sometimes people can't afford the repairs and reserve studies and reserve fees that are required. And you end up with some of the projects we have in Aspen. We know the blue roofs are failing, and there has never been the kind of money it takes to take care of those buildings. And I don't quite know what to say about that. I also know when the economy went bad in Aspen, a lot of people who were in ownership found that they no longer had jobs. I know a lot of people that lost their units during the recession between 08 and 12 before Aspen really picked up again. So that's kind of problematic. In general in Aspen, and I know maybe you're suggesting things need to be different, but when you have a 3% appreciation rate in something you purchased and your mortgage is at higher than that, you're losing money already, and you're not keeping up with the appreciation of free market stuff. So the longer you live there, you know, the worse it gets.
That's why we suggest you look at another way with the RO
and so
provision.
I want to discuss it with you guys, because I don't have, you know, I understand what you're asking and why. I just don't have good ideas. I mean, I think it's fine, listen, Basalt Vista is a beautiful project, but as far as I can tell from the newspaper article, they got $3 million of infrastructure money from Pitkin County. Land was donated at $3 million, and there's a lot of other subsidies that mean that those units were subsidized at $370,000 a unit. Gail feels that should be a standard for the valley, and I might add that it's a nonprofit. So the liability issues I face are very different.
Yeah, no, that's well
Furthermore,
taken.
My pro forma is to sell these buildings, because I have no desire to own them. I'd be happy to sell them to the residents, but what I can't do is sell a project that has the ongoing possibility of legal liability. So that one doesn't really work.
Well, I mean, you could certainly develop a project and insist on waivers. I mean, I think people can, other than
I don't.
immediate 6 month or.
Listen, I'll look into anything, and I'm willing to have this conversation, but I sort of asked that, and I don't think Kiowa gives these people a tremendous number of rights and puts a landlord in a pretty difficult position, and that's why everybody has come to you willing to do rental, but not affordable. So if there's a way that the city can deal with the liability, I understand that. But, then I'm a lot more interested. But I need to take the money from that and use it to build the site and everything else in the world. But I also want, it's easy to say the vesting of 7 years is fine, but go tell the bank that, they lose interest in valuing that property that they don't think will be developed within that 7-year period. So they don't see, they're only going to look at my approvals as going as far, the value of what I can build in 7 years. And if they don't think that's absorbable, then I don't have a bankable piece of the project. So some of these are all sound reasonable until you try to figure out how to pay for this stuff. I will say from Bach, Mike Kozdrowski, who's had 5 years of experience in Aspen, is very pro-rental and very negative about the liability we all take on when we do sale projects. I'm mostly worried about my personal liability, and also that it just gets a lot more difficult to finance this. My interest in doing 46 units gets, maybe I should just think, maybe it's, that becomes a liability that scares me at a certain point. So I'm willing to work with you guys on this, but, and maybe it's something we all want, but I need a project that ultimately I'm not looking to make money on the affordable housing, I'm just looking to get my money out of it when I build it so I can use it to do the rest of the project, so.
Yeah.
But Jeff's the attorney, if he can figure out a way to satisfy some of this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think, what I'm suggesting is that, first of all, an RO mechanism, so, you're not into appreciation caps. You would build things that, you would sell with some margin. I don't think anybody's asking you to take a beating on what you build and sell. You would sell it for cost plus, and, you would have some fair return. And, there would have to be some, to get around the construction defect, legislation that's, the state's been wrestling with. From what I've read, there are opportunities for waivers, and people could waive their right of protest, or they could waive their right of claiming after, certainly it'd be a fair 90-day or 180-day warranty period, but beyond that, people would have to be willing to waive those just so they don't have the right to come back to you 20 years later. So, I mean, the law right now is really not very sensible. So, I don't know, you're in this business.
Look into it. Listen, I'm not.
If I may, on the construction defect issues and liability issues, I mean, there's certainly provisions in state statutes that apply and are non-waivable, and there are more recent provisions that were incorporated into Kiowa related to construction defect actions with potential for classes within those common interest communities. But if it's council's direction, I mean, I can explore what those issues are in more detail and bring
Yeah.
back more information and speak with developers.
Yeah, I've probably said enough. I mean, I just, I guess what we're trying to do is give you a sense of the council, what I think the issues are gonna be for us before the gavel comes down on the voting for this, so, that's all
Well, I
I
don't
wanted
think
to
we're
get at.
picking on Michael either.
Yeah.
I think this is something that we're interested in across the board in any development. You just happen to be here and be open
No,
to
but
discussing
listen,
affordable
I
housing.
understand exactly what all of you are saying, and I'd like us to figure out a solution that I can live with, and I happen to be a strong believer in rental housing and the fact that we have a much more fluid workforce than we've ever had before in our country. And I've got millennial children, and I watch them and their friends, and they're pretty much all over the place and moving pretty frequently, and they're much more interested in rental housing, and it's becoming more of a trend in this country than it has been in the past. And in Europe, Europeans have lived with rental in the cities forever. It's, at one point I know, and this is probably 30 or 40 years ago, they had double the number of people living in rental housing than we have in this country.
But
And
our predicament is rentals 266, ownership is 0, so,
yeah, no, I
And we're
understand
not
that.
saying, and we're not saying that, 46 of the units have to be 100% resident occupied, but just entertain the idea of a percentage of it.
Sure, listen, I'm not, I think we're all on the same page of wanting to create the best community we can there with the most kinds of diversity, and I understand exactly why you're asking for it, okay? You said it's 26-0, there's gotta be a place for some of this stuff, right? So there's a reason that it isn't there, and let's see if we can come up with a solution there.
I failed to mention Basalt Vista, which is 27 ownership units. I was there at the dedication last night and met with the school teachers as they were moving their boxes in, and I saw it firsthand. And there is something that's undeniable about the opportunity to own and having a vision of living here for a very long time. And that's our job, is to build community. And so that's why we're making a point of it, so.
And I understand the risk that you guys are pointing out, but I also think that there's a tremendous social risk of not exploring this, because this is a tremendous opportunity to get something done and to kind of make that a little more balanced. So I'd love to see what some options are to help mitigate the valid risks that you're bringing up on the fiscal side.
Let me ask Jeff this question. Can the city assume the liability after a normal warranty period? And I realize there'd have to be a lot of legal explanation of where that starts and stops.
No.
And why is that?
Be a multi-year fiscal obligation to begin with, but I mean, I'm happy to look into it more, but I think that's probably a non-starter from a legal standpoint. If taking on any potential claim for defect that would go multiple years into the future, so.
Okay, additional comments. All right, I think we've gotten to the point we got to, so we're gonna take this up again. I don't know what our schedule's looking like.
What I tell you.
Setting this for the 28th?
Mayor, I move the town council continue the public hearing to June 14th, 2022.
Second.
Okay.
Moved and seconded, we're gonna have to have a roll call on that, or maybe not, it's a resolution.
You can just do a voice vote.
Okay, we'll do a voice vote, so all those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. To be continued, thanks everybody for coming out.
If any of you guys have any solutions to this housing issue,
Yeah.
I'm all ears anytime, pick up the phone. I guess you can't do that. Talk to James and he can talk to me. But, I'd love to figure out how to make this work.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would say, a personal observation, Park Modern's been a remarkable addition to the town. Very successful, very smartly designed, very well received, provides great housing opportunity. It fills quite a niche, and so it's an important value to the town. So it's not just the affordable housing side of it. The other units are going to serve a real valuable function.
I gotta say, my team, I think we feel like the luckiest people in the world that we get to work every day on a project like this in a community like this.
Yeah.
And, it's just, as architects, you don't usually get to do something like this, and as architects, you don't usually get to control your destiny quite this way and work directly with the town. And it's just been an honor to work with you guys and be able to do this project in this valley. And it's our last shot, so we want to do it as well as we can.
Great, thank you.
Thank
We'll
you.
see you on the 14th. Okay, that was quick. Next item. So we're up to 7B, first reading of ordinance number 13, series of 2022, an ordinance of the Town Council, Town of Basalt, Colorado, granting amendments to the phasing for Stotts Mill development in Basalt. James Lint, Kristen Peterson.
Michael,
Michael, we got another item that's underway here. So James, you got the floor.
Yeah. This evening, we have the applicant with us, Kristen Peterson of MSP1 LLC. This is first reading of an ordinance that would approve of an amendment to the phasing for the Stotts Mill subdivision PUD to permit the construction of the fourth multifamily building in Stotts Mill prior to the completion of the daycare core and shell and the two parks that are in the development. As background, Stotts Mill is an 18-acre development that was approved for 113 dwelling units, and it's just north of Basalt High School, as you can see here on the vicinity map that's in your packet. It includes a 4,000 square foot daycare core and shell and two parks. Let me go to the site plan. Two parks, a passive park on the north end and then an active park on the south end of the development. I apologize, having computer issues here.
Is that an animation or is it just loading?
There you go.
No, it's just loading. There is a requirement in the Stotts Mill ordinance that required the applicant to finish the daycare core and shell and the two parks before a building permit could be issued on the 57th unit in the development, as is outlined in page 237 of your packet. And so the applicant's request is the ability to start construction on the fourth multifamily building before they complete the daycare core and shell and the two parks. The first three multifamily buildings, and I'll point them out here, are currently under construction, so this would be the fourth one to start. And here is the daycare core and shell. The applicants have a permit to construct the daycare core and shell at the current time. They've provided design and it's been reviewed. The applicants have indicated that they are willing to discuss the ability for the town to buy down deed restrictions on more of the units once the town's financial consultant has finished his analysis of kind of fair value for buy downs. The town's consultant, Bruce Kimmel, has been working on that financial analysis, but was delayed a bit. So the town should have that before the second reading of this ordinance. The applicants have also expressed a willingness to provide priority in leasing the free market multifamily units to Basalt employees and employers. And it was noted by the applicant as part of their email that they have that this would lessen the impacts on the occupants of the first three multifamily buildings. The first of those is to be occupied, I think, later this summer, and Briston can speak to more about that, in that it would allow the fourth building to be constructed quicker in the development, so less time to have construction impacts on the other buildings. Staff has built in a 9-unit buffer for the single-family lots in the proposed ordinance because currently it would allow the first three buildings plus 9 of the single-family lots to be built. Staff thinks it's important to kind of keep that buffer because we'll probably see some of the single-family permits this year. So that's included in the ordinance. Staff also notes that we do have $3 million still left in security, and the applicant has indicated that they would be willing to forego getting $800,000 back of that security until the CO on the daycare is completed. So we've incorporated that in the packet materials in the draft ordinance. This evening, staff would recommend hearing comments from the applicant. It's not a public hearing, but you could entertain public comments if you wish to, and then providing council discussion. And if you're comfortable, you could approve the adjustment to the phasing on first reading and set a second reading date for the next meeting. Briston, do you have some comments for the council from the top?
Thank you, James. Hi, I'm Briston Peterson. I'm a partner in MSP Development Group. I was somewhat sympathetic to the applicant before this presentation. I've been involved in this project since I was 40 years old. I'm 57. So for 17 years, I've been working on this project, just to put it in the context of vested rights and what it actually takes to get something like this built and developed in this community, in this valley. What I'm asking is a slight variance to set this project up for success. I see no advantage in extending a development cycle and extending the building cycle, exposing the project to additional risk. We have financing in place to build the multifamily. We have financing in place to build the daycare. Both permits have been submitted. We literally have the fourth building permit ready for issuance, but I feel like we're being handicapped because we can't build. And what does that mean? That means more impact on the community. That means dragging out construction. That means exposing the project to financial risk. The markets are changing exponentially around us in the permanent financing world, if you're paying attention to that at all. We've been very patient with this project. The town has been very patient with us as well. And we feel that this is just a minor request to allow us just to finish this project. I asked James the other day, I said, can you name one reason why you wouldn't want to see this project finished? And so if we could build these two buildings concurrently, the town will still get exactly what they want, which is a C of O on the daycare building. And we'd just like to build these two buildings concurrently so we can work our way out of the project. As James said, we have sold all but 3 lots in the single-family units. It's been very exciting to see that a lot of the purchasers are people that are actually having the ability to have a stakeholder in this community, to own real estate, to be able to own their own house. And we're just trying to stay true to the theme that we created when we developed this project initially, is we're really trying to build a project for the community, for the people that work in our various businesses, that work in our grocery stores, that work at the Roaring Fork Club, that work at our restaurants, that work at the post office, that are the teachers that teach our kids. And we're just asking for the slight modification to set this project up for success and bring closure to it.
Thanks, Briston. Questions of Mr. Peterson or James?
Did you say you had the permit for the fourth building?
Yes,
Have
the
it
town,
ready.
the town has it. We've paid, I believe, all of the fees, the water tap fees, and we're just waiting for the town to issue it.
Oh, okay, so it has not been issued.
And, you know, I'd like to remind that, you know, when we put this ordinance together with the town, how many years ago was that, James?
Originally 2013 or 14, and then it got re-upped in 2017.
Yeah, 2017. You think that you can assume all the variables that can happen in a economic development like this, and you just can't. You know, what I know today is totally different than I knew back in 2014. And But any questions that I can ask about the project specifically, I'd more than glad to answer.
David?
As far as if everything does run concurrently, when do you think you'll finish, like, the big milestones, the park, the shell?
Yeah, we'll have the North Park and the South Park completed by snowfall of this year, so by fall of this year. If the council here literally approves the issuance of the fourth multifamily building, we'll build that concurrently with the daycare, and we would see by March of 2023 that both of those assets would be online, and we would have the opportunity to lease to a daycare provider.
And the parks?
The South Park as well will be finished, both parks, the North Park and South Park, will be completed this calendar year.
And I have to ask, the tennis courts too?
Yeah, tennis courts, we're going to be starting here in a short
So
order.
getting pretty full around
Yeah,
tennis.
we have tennis courts and a sports court in the South Park. If you've been out there, looked around, we have the restroom under construction, and you're going to start seeing that building going vertical. You're going to start to see curb and gutter here within the next few weeks going in, and you're going to start to see some base course asphalt coming down. We set up a design review board, and we've had the graceful presence of Larry Yaw, Michael Fuller, and Kim Weil on the design review board, myself. So I've really tried to make this a community about the community, and we're really taking to heart to giving the first opportunity to local businesses to lease locally. Because I'm a big believer, if you cannot house your employees, you don't have a sustainable business. I run a business here in Basalt. I've been in business in Basalt for a number of years. I employ close to 40 people on average, and I hope to house a handful of our employees in the multifamily.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I guess, if absent this ordinance, you might have to shut down, then have to remobilize, and, that's a big impact and cost for everybody. It seems really unnecessary.
Yeah,
so.
big impact on cost, Mr. Kane, and a big impact on the local community.
Why would you have to shut down and remobilize if you're still building the core and shell of the daycare and working on the parks?
Because the way the current ordinance reads is that the daycare has to have a certificate of occupancy in place, and then we initiate the construction of the fourth building. So what I'm asking for is just to build the two buildings concurrently, end up at the same place in an earlier time and minimize the impact on the community.
And then you could find the operator at a later date, because he's still gonna find an operator who's gonna finish it out.
And that's why we constructed this, right, Ryan? Because we were worried just about that situation.
Will you repeat that? I'm sorry.
We made the writing like this, the ordinance like this, because it was holding his feet to the fire for the daycare center.
Yeah, for the public improvements,
parks
so,
and
in the parks and the daycare, that's right, yeah. So, and the 57 units was, and James was here for it, but, my understanding of it is, it was a number that seemed reasonable, at the time, and, now Briston's into this, scenario where he's doing these, the multifamily buildings that end up totaling just more than 57 for the four, so.
Yeah, that's correct. There's a total of 64 units, and as a technicality, there's actually one building permit per building, but there's 16 units in each building, and there's a total of 4 buildings. So, I just didn't think through all the scenarios when this ordinance was drafted and contemplated, and so I just asked for your approval this evening.
And what guarantee do we have that all that will get done? Can we,
Well,
do we have something else?
First
we
of
can-
all, you have about.
He's got it under construction.
$3
right
million.
now. Yeah.
Well, let me bring some light to that. First of all, we have 3 partners in this. We have about $22 million in personal guarantees, okay, with collateral with a bank. So that's a pretty significant guarantee. Second of all, the town of Basalt has a letter of credit, cash on cash, dollar for dollar, sitting in American National Bank, that if we were to default for any reason, they could call upon that letter of credit to complete the project.
Well, I'm not implying that you might default. I'm asking, you've said that you're gonna build this last building concurrent with the daycare and the parks. That's the piece that I'm asking, you know.
It makes sense construction-wise. I mean, it's cost-effective.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
sorry, I don't have my glasses on. At least, what was your question so I can specifically answer it?
The question was, I'm not concerned that you're going to default on doing the daycare and the parks. I understand the financial reasons why you have to complete it. I'm asking, like, what guarantee do we have that that actually is gonna all happen concurrently? I'm looking at it from the perspective of being a community member who wants to use the park and doesn't really care much about the development itself. You know, I'm just sort of being devil's advocate here and thinking like, I want my park.
At least maybe I can help. We still have a requirement that they would have to finish the CO on the daycare and the parks before getting a final CO on that fourth building, so that they would hold up occupancy.
Okay, so that answers the
Yeah, and
question.
at least I would also say it's just simple economics, right? There's no advantage for us as a development team to drag this process out. Time is money.
Well, I'm fine with it if it's gonna
Yeah.
happen concurrently, but if we're gonna get a fourth apartment building before we get parks and daycare, then I'm concerned. So
yeah,
that's sort of why
yeah,
I'm
the-
asking this line of questioning.
The fourth building the parks will be online this calendar year. The fourth building will be online the first quarter of 2023.
And I would also,
Questions, comments? Go
well,
ahead.
I'd just like to make a comment too about Briston working with the Childhood Council on understanding what is needed for a child care facility to be able to occupy this building. So he's been very communicative and understanding in that.
Yeah, and Brian, I'm glad you brought that up, if you read in the ordinance, basically, we have a year to find a daycare provider. This may or may not become an issue. If we can find a business that can occupy the space and build out the space and have a daycare presence there. In the event we can't find that provider, then that 4,000 square feet goes to the town, and the town could look at, an annex, or, planning and zoning could be located over there, or the mayor's office could be in there, or something like that. And in the event that if the town cannot find a use for the space, then I would imagine we would come back to council and request that the 4,000 square feet be carved up into 3 or 4 deed-restricted affordable units. So I'm just playing out like how this scenario could look, but hopefully we can provide a daycare provider in the space.
Okay, additional comments, questions, your motion?
Mayor, I move that the town council approve the ordinance number 13, series of 2022 on first reading and set the public hearing and second reading date for June 14th, 2022.
Or second?
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Pam, please call the roll.
Absolutely. Let's begin with Elise Huddle,
No.
Ryan Slack,
Yes.
Bill Kane,
Yes.
Dieter Schindler,
Yes.
David Knight,
Yes.
Angela Anderson,
Yes.
and Glenn Drummond.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-1 opposed.
Okay, thank you very much.
Tristan?
All right.
Thanks, James. That takes us to next item on the agenda, 7C. This is resolution number 38, series of 2022. A resolution of the Town Council of Basalt, Colorado, approving an investment advisor agreement with Ayler's Investment Partners. So, Christie.
Thank you, Mayor. So this one is kind of exciting. We, as I pointed out earlier in our quarterly financial report, the town has some money sitting in Color Trust, and we've got time right now before we need to pay that out, you know, up to actually 2.5 years on a lot of those Basalt Forward projects. And so we're getting currently, what, 0.15 to 0.2% on interest, and that's gonna continue to go up on our Color Trust accounts because it's lagging with the interest rate increases, right? Because they have to let those other older maturities mature, and then they can replace those with better interest rates, so it takes time. But this allows us the ability to do what's called laddering our investments and be a bit more proactive about the specific investments that we have the town hold. And so they will be very specific investments in accordance with our investment policy. And so we talked to Ellers a little bit about providing a proposal, which they did do, which is attached. And we went and talked to the Finance Advisory Board about this proposal. They're looking at meeting with me at least monthly, probably bi-weekly for a time, and going through this, all of the different investment options and how we should structure this, and then we'll keep the council apprised of actual investments that are being invested on the quarterly report. And then the benefit to the town is additional interest. I mean, that's really the bottom line of it. It adds a little interest rate risk because if you're gonna go out 1.5 years, you're gonna get more benefit up front, because then, for example, you get a 2% rate when you would have gotten 0.2% for a time, but maybe the interest rate does rise to a point where you could get more in the current market. But I think that even given that risk, this is a really good strategy because it allows a little more ability for us to get the money up front right now while we have the money for Basalt Forward especially. And the fee that they're looking to charge is 10 basis points, which is 0.1% on the total amount invested, which is really small. I mean, usually they charge 25 basis points, and they're giving us a deal because they've worked with the town for so long, which we're grateful for. So I really don't see any disadvantage to doing this. We had Jeff review the agreement, and he's still going through this with Ellers. We have a few minor points that this would be subject to the attorney's approval as well and final review. But generally, I think we're at a point where we're really excited to move forward on this.
Pretty strict rules on what are eligible investments. I mean, are these all fixed income
Yes.
or bonds or CDs or what
It's
can we invest
a lot of low risk investments such as CDs, treasuries.
Not investing in equities.
Yeah, in AAA rated commercial paper, things like that. All of that spelled out, delineated pretty specifically in the town's investment policy as well, which we established about 1.5 years ago now. So it was great we have that in place so that we're going to stick to that to a T.
And how many basis points was the fees again? No, it was a lot.
10 basis points, 0.1%.
I think, free market, full equity advisors are like 1%. So that's about the lowest fee I've ever heard.
Mm-hmm.
1/10 of 1%.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
But it's 1/10 of 1% of the outstanding balance of the account.
Correct.
Annualized.
At any given time, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
yeah, it's okay.
Mayor, I move the town council adopt resolution number 38, series of 2022.
Second.
Okay, moved in second, resolution, we can approve this by voice vote, please indicate, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, thank you, that's resolution 38 passes. We're on to resolution number 39, series of 2022, resolution of the Town Council of Basalt, Colorado, approving a temporary license agreement for encroachment and sidewalk adjacent to Midland Avenue for expanded restaurant seating for Huerta LLC, doing business as Two Rivers Cafe. So Ryan and Jeff.
Yeah, so I'll take this one here, and Jeff can follow up with anything I missed. But we had a request from the owner of Two Rivers Cafe to utilize seating on the sidewalk, similar to how they had done in the last few years during COVID. So I went over and I spoke with the owner, and as it is now, I did explain to them that, you know, it'd probably be hard to support, and from a staff perspective, we wouldn't make a positive recommendation to block the entire sidewalk again. It was just, I went out and personally measured the distance between sort of the railing that they had put up to the curb line, and when a car was parked there, most any car, yeah, it was definitely less than 3 feet. And so just if you had two people, somebody with a stroller or wheelchair certainly would have trouble getting through there. So what they were fine with is limiting it to 2 tops right up against their building. So I think they have 4 or 5 2-tops. They removed the railing that was separating sort of the under the canopy and then outside of the canopy, so people can kind of maneuver. And it does leave about 5 feet just under the canopy, plus what's on the outside. I've been walking that quite a bit lately, and I did happen to notice that the menu board that sits outside is constricting some of the space to make the entry into that about 3 feet again.
It's very visible.
Yes, it is extremely visible, but
You know it's for breakfast every morning.
in the spirit of trying to maintain access for everyone, we'll follow up with that, and we just want to, you know, make it equitable for everybody to pass through there.
So are they still going to use railing, or no, just the tables will be up against?
They'll just be right up against, and
windows there.
they won't, you know, the thing that we were able to do during COVID was a temporary state measure to expand liquor license area. We can't do that anymore. That's been rescinded. And so they are not seeking extension of their liquor license. So this would just be, you know, their eating crowd. And so any liquor is prohibited in that area, unless, of course, they came back and pursued a liquor license. So, I think that's about it. And we have this license that Jeff put together.
Yeah, I think that's about it. The couple things to add, and maybe you said this, but one of the requirements of the license was to kind of clean up that fencing area, some of the things between the posts. And then, yeah, otherwise the goal was to maintain as much of the sidewalk open as possible. So I think it's limited to those 2 top width tables up against the front of the building. And yeah, that's about it. Used their kind of standard form of our license agreement we've developed with some tweaks to accommodate some of these particular situations. And that's about all I have.
So no diner space in the building, no 3 tops, right? Just to be clear.
That's right. Yeah, they should not, because then you're going to get chairs pushed out into that area. So.
Mayor, I move the town council adopt resolution number 39, series of 2022.
Second.
Okay, been moved and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution 39 passes. So thank you, guys.
Thank you all.
That's our exciting evening.
I saw that. You to the second.
I never really realized how much those
Second.
posts
Can't wait for my
stick
second.
out there. I mean, at no fault of the restaurant.